I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, October 24th, 2022, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Before we get started, I'd like to thank members of the public for attending the school board business meeting to observe the work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. We appreciate the time you took to be here this evening. Dr. Hillman, we have some items in the table file.
Yes, we have several items in the table file. We've added an item for discussion and report. Director of Instructional Services, Hope Langston, will be here to discuss a request for some additional English learner support. We have a gift agreement in the consent agenda, as well as appointments, increase, decrease, change in assignment, and a couple of resignations. We also have included an updated style guide based on a couple of pieces of feedback, a couple of typos, and some corrections that are listed in the table file. So that is what we have in the table file this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no objections, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Jeff, second by Amy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, we do not have anyone signed up for public comment, so we will move on to the next item. And that is announcements and recognition.
Yes, just have a couple this evening, and we expect and hope to be able to announce more of these kinds of accomplishments in the coming weeks. But we learned from the activities office today that both the volleyball team and the girls cross country team are Big Nine conference champions for the fall. So we congratulate volleyball and girls cross country for their success. We also want to remind board members that on November 11th, Bridgewater Elementary is hosting their Veterans Day Assembly. It begins at 9 a.m. and is in their gymnasium, and board members are invited to attend. If you've not ever attended the Bridgewater Veterans Day Assembly, it is quite the deal. So we would invite you to observe that day. And those are your announcements for this evening.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. And it is now my distinct pleasure to congratulate you on being named 2023 Minnesota Superintendent of the Year.
Thank you.
This is an honor that is presented by Minnesota Association of School Administrators, and you're now in the running to be recognized as the National Superintendent of the Year at the February conference in San Antonio. We wish you luck with that. I am going to read a short excerpt from the press release and then open the floor to any board members who would like to make a comment tonight. Of course, they can connect with you outside of this meeting. So from the press release from the Minnesota Association of Public School Administrators, saying that they named Dr. Matthew Hillman, Superintendent of Northfield Public Schools, the 2023 Minnesota Superintendent of the Year, selected for this honor by a panel of representatives from a variety of Minnesota education organizations. Nominees are evaluated on how each candidate demonstrates leadership for learning, communication skills, professionalism, and community involvement. Under Dr. Hillman's leadership, Northfield Public Schools has worked to close achievement gaps, addressing these gaps in 3 areas: strengthening and expanding district childcare and preschool programs, intentional collaboration with community preschools and childcare programs, and supporting parents seeking services for their preschool-aged children. Also stated in the press release, the district's grade 3 students have been continuously improving proficiency in reading. Despite a regression during the pandemic, Northfield Public Schools was identified by the Campaign for Grade Level Reading as a 2021 Bright Spot community for its response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Only 54 communities were recognized across the United States, and Northfield was the only one in Minnesota. During his tenure, Dr. Hillman has developed a cascading communication strategy to promote aligning the district's vision and operations across community. In a recent district survey where 88% of the respondents agreed or strongly agreed that the superintendent uses a variety of methods to promote effective communication throughout the district. And 84% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that I have a clear understanding of the mission and goals of my school district. Finally, Dr. Hillman has quickly emerged as a fierce leader and advocate for equity and student achievement, not only within his district, but also across the entire state. And that was a quote from MASA executive Dr. Deb Hinton. If you ever have the opportunity to work with Dr. Hillman, you will quickly learn that his top priority is the well-being and success of all students and families. We are proud to have Dr. Hillman represent our administrators as Minnesota's 2023 Superintendent of the Year. I would like to open the floor for any board members who'd like to make additional comments. Otherwise, we can connect with Dr. Hillman outside of the meeting. Okay, very well. Yeah.
I just thank the board and the students who are here and the community for letting me do this job here. It is really, I mean, we joke that it is a special place, but it is a special place. And it is a great honor to do this work in this place with all of the people here tonight and all the people we serve every day. So what's next?
Well, I just wanted to add my my personal thanks to you for showing such strong leadership in our district. And I've only known you a short time, but in that short time, there's two traits that have really impressed me about you, and that's your commitment to improvement and also your genuine interest in the person in front of you. And so I'm grateful for your model of leadership to me personally, and of course in this district, and I'm proud that you earned this recognition, and congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
Good. So now we're on to items for discussion and reports. We have 3 items tonight. And we will begin with the Northfield High School Facility Plan Voter Survey results. Dr. Dawn Lifto will present the results of the High School Facility Plan Voter Survey conducted by Morris Leatherman. Welcome, Dr. Lifto.
Thank you very much, members of the board. I'd also like to add my congratulations to your superintendent. Kind of a tough act to follow coming up right after that, but certainly a pleasant agenda item. What I'm going to be doing tonight is going through a kind of a high-level summary of the survey that was conducted recently by Morris Leatherman. Getting community feedback on areas that the district is considering for the future. And as I go through the PowerPoint, if you want to interrupt me for a question, you certainly can do so. I'd be happy to respond. So in terms of a little bit of the context for the study, we ended up doing survey of 400 registered voters, all living within the boundaries of the school district. As you can see, the interviews were done in late September. There were 43 items in the questionnaire and averaging about 10 minutes on the phone. The researchers who know a lot about phone surveys suggest 10 to 15 minutes is kind of the sweet spot to be on the phone. So we were in that range. And the margin of error is plus and minus 4.8%. The easiest way to think about that as I go through the slides is just round that off to 5. And if you see a slide that says that 50% of the people think the sky is blue, if you add 5% to that and subtract 5%, there's a 95% probability that that represents the views of all registered voters living in Northfield. So you'll see discrete numbers as I go through the slides, but remember the margin of error is part of that study as well. We did have demographic targets. In the next slide, we'll show you what targets I'm talking about. The purpose of a demographic target is to make sure that the demographic composition of those 400 interviews that we completed closely mirrors the demographics of all registered voters living within the district. And in this particular case, you can see the 5 areas that we controlled. So again, the notion of the control is that if 54% of registered voters are women, we want to have about 54% of the interviews be with women. And the same with the other demographic controls you see on this slide. We do keep track of cell phones versus landlines and home ownership, but they were not tracked in the study. So the study had three sections. The first section was looking at potential improvement projects for the high school building, improvement projects for athletic and activity spaces, and also the potential for new ice arena. Each section of the survey measured the initial support for those three things. Then people were provided with information. Then we came back a second time and asked opinions to see if the information had changed people's opinions. And you'll see that as I go through these slides, similar approach for all three. So the first section focused on what you see in the first two paragraphs here, evaluating facility needs at the high school. Also under consideration, upgrades to the auditorium, locker rooms, athletic facilities. And just that people were asked if knowing that would make them more or less likely to be supportive of a proposal. And so this is the initial support, sometimes also called the uninformed support. And the reason that it's characterized that way is the only thing people have heard is what you saw on that previous slide. Not a lot of detail, nothing yet about cost, nothing yet about tax impact. So it's essentially kind of an initial reaction to those potential projects. 62% is a very healthy place to start. I would say more commonly, you might see 50 to 55% in that initial support. So this was a good, healthy reaction. So after getting that first reaction, there were a total of 9 projects that were presented. When they were on the phone with people, they were done in random order. So some people heard the fifth one first, some people heard the last one second, and that's done to avoid having the order of the probes affect how people respond. There was one split sample, and you'll see that, and I'll point it out when we get to the slide. In a split sample question, half of the people randomly hear the A version. So you'll see an A next to the question. The other half of the people randomly hear the B version. No one hears both. And that provides you an opportunity to see whether a difference in the detail or the verbiage affects how people responded. So I'm going to read you some statements about the potential upgrades to the high school and related projects. For each of these, tell me if knowing that would make you more or less likely to be supportive. And so you'll see these in the next couple slides. These are abbreviated over on the left because just to get room on the slide, so those are not the exact question. So what you're seeing in the first percentage, if you look at question 13 at the top, the 79%, that's the percentage of people who said, if I knew that some of the money would be used for upgrading real world experience, career exploration, 79% said, if I knew that, that would make me much more likely or somewhat more likely to be supportive. So the 79% is the positive reaction to that particular probe. The 14% that you see up on that top row is the percentage of people who said, if I knew that, that would make me somewhat or much less likely to be supportive. So that's the negative reaction. So as you see from top to bottom, we're starting with the one that had the largest positive reaction at 79%. As you can see, just quickly eyeballing this slide, all of them are quite healthy at 72% and up. Notice the question 15B, that's the split sample question I talked about before. So half of the people heard 15B and the other half heard 15A, which you'll see on the next slide. They both had to do with energy efficiency projects. The 15B offered more detail about that in terms of what that might be. So here's the rest of those. And again, you can see they're ranging from 63% up to 72% with the positive reactions. Again, good, healthy reactions. And the light green is the percentage of people who responded negatively to those statements. The 15A, that's the other half of that split sample, still at 70%, which is good. The 15B that offered more detail was at 73%. Not a big difference, but a little bit stronger. So we've gone through those now. And so now we're coming back for the informed benchmark. So as you can see on this slide, essentially people are being told, I've told you a little bit more about these projects. Tell me again, what do you think? And the red rectangle at 67.3% shows how opinions changed after people heard more information. Now, the good news is it went up, and you're always hoping that it's going to go up. From a statistical point of view, the difference between the two is not statistically significant. The next slides show you how people reacted after they heard about those 9 projects based on their demography. So here we're seeing parent status. Parent means I've got 1 or more children in the Northfield Public Schools right now. Non-parent is I've never had a child in the Northfield Public Schools. Alumni parent are people who said, I used to have kids in the district, but I don't anymore. So here's the support, based on that parent status. Not surprisingly, parents were on a percentage basis more supportive, having a vested interest in those projects more so than non-parents and alumni parents, but fairly healthy support across the board. Over on the left, you're seeing support by gender. This one is interesting because 90% of the time females are 5 to 10% more supportive than males on everything, almost everywhere. In your case, it's essentially the same. So you're either doing a really good job with males as compared to most other districts. It's hard to know for sure. Remember, of course, the margin of error. Each of those numbers could be 4.8% more or less, but very comparable and positive support. On the right-hand side of the screen, you're seeing support based on age. In the vast majority of school districts, the strongest support comes from the lower age demographics as compared to the upper. That's common and normal. We see that pretty much everywhere. On the left, you're seeing support based on where I live within the boundaries of the school district. And on the right, you're seeing support based on past voting activity. In this context, past voting activity means we looked at the last 9 elections where people had an opportunity to vote in Northfield, whether it was a city election, a school district, a national election. We looked at the last 9. In the less active, the blue bar, those are people who voted from 0 to 2 out of the last 9. The middle bar is people who voted 3 to 5 times out of the last 9. And over on the right, the very active, people who voted at least 6 out of the last 9, 6 or more. In this particular case, after people got information, the group that was the most supportive also is the group that historically would be most likely to vote. On the left, you're seeing support based on income. This varies a lot from district to district. I would say in general, middle to upper middle to higher levels of income usually are a little bit more supportive. And that's quite similar to your profile. On the right, you're seeing support based on educational attainment of the person who was being interviewed. One thing that was interesting when we peeled back the data on this, the graduate over on the right, the 90% of the people who matched up with graduate degrees were over 55 and 40% were over 65. And so to a great extent on this, that became almost like looking at the age profile because the graduate people who had the graduate degrees tended to be older. This is support based on homeowner versus renter. Most of the time in school surveys, we see just the opposite of what you're seeing here with renters typically 5 to 10% more supportive. And the reason for that is I'm at a point in my life now of renting, and most renters don't necessarily connect the dots between school levies, and their rent as homeowners would. So for whatever reason, in this particular case, it might be the number of college students who were interviewed, for example, that might have moved this a little bit. So now we're moving on to the second area that to be tested, and that relates to community facility task force evaluating the expansion and improvement projects for athletic and activity spaces. Potential upgrades could include the multi-sport field house, synthetic turf. So based on what you know now, how would you feel about these kinds of projects? And so the initial support came in at 55%. That's a positive response. It wasn't as high as the first facility projects that were tested, but still pretty good. 29% opposing and the balance undecided or no opinion. So similar to what we did in the other section, we tested 4 potential improvements to athletic facilities. These were also done in random order, so there was no bias on when people heard some of these probes. I'm going to read some statements about potential expansion improvement projects for athletics and activity. For each one, tell me if knowing that would make you more likely or less likely to be supportive. So here are the 4 that were tested, similar to what we talked about before. The 64%, if you look at the top row, that's adding up the people who said, if I knew that it included a field house and a walking track, that would make me much more likely or somewhat more likely. So the 64% is the positive reaction to that particular project. The 23% is people who said, knowing that would make me less likely or much less likely to be supportive. I didn't mention before, but the third percent over on the right is the no difference, combination of no difference. So we went through those 4. Then we came back and said, okay, I've told you a little bit more about those athletic and activity spaces. Tell me again, what do you think? And here you're seeing that the after people got information, support moved from 54.8 to 58.3. Again, that's the direction you want it to move, but it didn't move enough to make it statistically significant. And similar to the first section, now we're looking at how people responded based on their demographic characteristics. Again, here's parent, non-parent, alumni parent. Nothing surprising there. Support by gender. Here, the males kind of went ahead a little bit. And so it may be that some of those athletic and activity projects are more appealing to males, both positive above the 50% threshold. Over on the right, you're seeing again the most common pattern where the strongest support came from the youngest demographics. Over on the left, you're looking support based on where do I live within the school district. And over on the right, support based on past voting activity. Similar to the first section that I went through, again, the strongest support came from the demographic group that historically has been most likely to vote. Household income on the left, got a couple bars kind of moving up and down, but overall, generally speaking, somewhat stronger support from middle and upper income. And you're seeing the same pattern with support by educational attainment you saw before, remembering that the graduate was somewhat of a replacement for age, as it turned out. Here's the homeowner renter. Here you're seeing the more familiar pattern that I mentioned to you. We almost always see renters a little bit more supportive than homeowners. So now we're getting to the third benchmark. When I say benchmark, what I'm referring to here is the first benchmark was the initial benchmark before people got information. The second benchmark is when they reacted after they had information. The third one is in the context of cost. So we're giving them some potential costs associated with these projects based on a home worth approximately $300,000. So in this particular study, we used 75, 150, 225, and 300. That's annual tax impact on that $300,000 home. And similar to what I talked about before, these were also done in random order. So if we had called your home, you might have heard the 300 first. Someone else might have heard the 225 first. And that again is done to avoid having people sense that you're taking me up the ladder or down the ladder and having that affect how I respond. So this is what it looked like in terms of percentage of support based on those four tax impacts that we talked about. As you might imagine, 100% of the time in school surveys like this, the line moves in the direction that your line moves. What's more significant is where does it start and where does it end up? Oops. This graph is kind of busy, but does provide some interesting information. What we're doing here is we're taking the people that responded here and saying, okay, what did the people say who pretty much always vote? What did the people say who vote about half the time? The largest part, or the red line that you can see starting mostly at the top, that's the group that gets there about half the time, 3 to 5 out of 9 times. And the very active group is at that 19%. In this case, the folks who historically had voted the most were somewhat less supportive compared to the other two groups. So again, what you're seeing with the 3 lines is what did the people say who pretty much always vote? What did the people say who vote about half the time? What do the people say who only vote 0 to 2 out of 9? Remembering on that 0 to 2, there are 18-year-olds who only have one chance to vote. So they're going to automatically be in that group. The third potential project that was tested related to building a new ice arena to replace the old city-owned facility. People were told this would be in partnership with the city of Northfield and local businesses. Based on what you know now, how would you react to that? And here you can see in blue that came out at 51% support, 31% opposition, 18% no opinion. There were 4 statements about that potential ice arena that were tested. They were done in random order. So I'm going to read you some statements about the potential to build a new ice arena. For each of these, tell me whether knowing that would make you more or less likely to be supportive. And here are the 4 statements that were tested. Again, the first percentage that's in the kind of red or orange color is the combination of people who said, if I knew that was going to be part of the deal, I would be much more likely or somewhat more likely. So it's adding up those two. And then the number in the kind of the green is the percentage of people who said knowing that would make me less likely or much less likely to be supportive. Now that you've heard some information about the potential to build a new ice arena, tell me again, what do you think? And here you're seeing in how people responded in red at 48.8%. Again, the difference between those two is not enough to be statistically significant. Here are the demographic responses to the potential ice arena project. Again, parent, non-parent. Remembering non-parents, I've never had kids in the district. Alumni parent, I have in the past, but I don't now. Male, female on the left. Age responses on the right. Both familiar patterns from what you've seen before. Support based on where I live. And then over on the right, support based on past voting activity. And here we have that very active group popping up at the top again in terms of their level of support. Household income on the left, that pattern looks very similar to what you've seen before. And support based on educational attainment also looks very familiar from what you've seen before. Here's the homeowner renter support level. Then we provide the people who are interviewed with an estimated tax impact specific to the potential ice arena. So people were told that property taxes to fund a new ice arena will increase about $833 a month or $100 per year for a home valued of $300,000. And here you're seeing the response to that, 49% favorable, 36% opposed, 15% no opinion. The next slides you'll see move away from the projects and look more at qualitative measures about how people feel about the school district. And then we also have some information related to communication. So I'll run through those with you. This particular probe has been asked for about 55 years in a national survey by Phi Delta Kappa. And so you're the teacher for the day. Give your local public schools a grade, A, B, C, D, or F. And the response came through like this for Northfield, 83% giving an A or a B, 3% a D or an F. It's an excellent response, a very, very strong ratio of positive to negative. So something you can feel good about. Because Phi Delta Kappa has asked this for 55 years, we also can provide a benchmark for you. So it's not just how people responded in Northfield without knowing how that would compare. So in this particular case, we're looking at the national benchmark in the orange, or excuse me, in the, I guess that's orange, and Northfield in blue. So if you start at the top, I won't go through all of these, but you see 36% compared to 21% nationally. And that this is an apples to apples comparison. People are not grading the nation's schools, they're grading their local public school, just like the people in Northfield did when they responded to the survey. So very favorable when compared to the national sample. As you think about the grade you just gave, which of the following best describes the reasoning behind your decision? And this starts up at financial management and a kind of a light blue. That's the 6% on the wheel. And if you follow the wheel clockwise and then go down the list on the right, you'll see how each of those line up. I won't go through all of them, but leadership and management is the second one. So if you follow it clockwise, that's the 23% on the wheel, and the same with the rest of them as you move around the wheel. People were also asked to grade the district's financial management. This also came through very, very strong, with roughly 2/3 giving an A or a B, and only 6% D or an F. This again is a very, very positive ratio, and as good or better than what we typically see in school surveys. We also ask people to respond to a statement. I would never vote for a tax increase, no matter what the amount or how the money raised would be used. This probe has been used hundreds of times and is one measure of tax climate. So again, we're saying I would never support any tax in any amount for any purpose. And what we're looking for in the result is the percentage of people who agreed with that statement. So in your case, it's 26%. It's the blue part of the diagram and the orange part. The normal range we see in school surveys is 15 to 25%. So you would be just at the upper end of that normal range. The last part of the survey looked at district communications. People were asked where they get most of their information about the Northfield Public Schools. And this is how they responded. Print in the blue, word of mouth in the orange, electronic in the green. Now, after we had people respond to this question, for the 30% who said print, they got a follow-up question just for them and essentially said, what print? And so this is how they responded to the follow-up question about print. For those who initially said word of mouth, the follow-up question for them is essentially whose word of mouth? You can see teachers and staff, friends and neighbors. For those who said initially, I get my stuff from electronic sources, their follow-up question was what electronic source? And here you're seeing social media and the district website. Anytime something the district produces and provides is the number one thing people are looking at, that is a very, very good thing. So the last several slides are summary slides of what I've gone through for you with the high school improvements. When people just got that initial summary without a lot of detail or context, support was at 62%. After they heard information, it increased to 67%. Greatest positive impact related to enhanced programs for real-world work experience, career exploration. Relatively smaller, and focus on the word relatively, 60% rather than 75 is still pretty good. Related to demolishing and remodeling older portions of the high school in reference to the task force recommendations. No significant difference in reactions with the two ways we asked about energy efficiency. Remember, one had a lot of more detail and one didn't. There was a 3% higher support with the detail, but not significant. Highest support for the high school improvements came from parents, younger voters, and very active voters. Lowest support came from people 55 and older, residents of Ward 1 and 2, and less active voters. The athletic improvements initial support was 54.8. After people got information, it moved to 58.3. Movement in the right direction, but not significant. Greatest positive impacts seen from adding walking track to the field house, relatively smaller positive impact from artificial turf and adding track and field space. Highest support for improvements to the athletic facilities came from parents and younger voters. Lower support from voters over 55 and residents of Ward 1 and 2, along with less active voters. Ice arena, the initial reaction to limited information had support at 50.8. After people got a little more information, support was at 48.8, essentially the same. That 2% difference is not statistically significant. On the ice arena, modest positive impacts seen from the sale of existing facilities that would partially offset the cost. Smaller positive impact from relocating baseball or softball to city parks. For the ice arena, the highest support came from parents, younger voters, wards 3 and 4, and very active voters. Lower support from resident wards 1 and 2, household incomes from 50 to 75,000, and less active voters. In terms of potential tax impact, at the time of the data collection, support levels rose above the margin of error at $125 per year on an average priced home. After looking at the response from very active, and less active voters, that was adjusted to $135 impact, testing as feasible at the time of the data collection. Very strong grades for the quality of the district overall, and also good, strong grades with the financial management. Participants were evenly split between getting their information from word of mouth and electronic media. And that is it. So,
Hey, thank you so much for that presentation and gathering those results for us. We were eagerly awaiting that, so appreciate all the work you put into it. Do you want to make some comments, Dr. Hillman?
So first of all, I want to thank Dr. Lifto and Morris Leatherman for conducting the survey. I think if you think about how many phone calls people get at their house, especially in the height of the election season that we're in just before the midterm elections, to get 400 registered voters to answer their phone, to take 10 minutes of their time to answer the questions, I really just shows that Morris Leatherman was able to deliver on what they told us that they would be able to do. So there's a lot of data here. There's a lot of really good information that we can use for you to deliberate and determine, what is the course that we might want to go related to the updates of the high school facility that we know are needed. What does the data tell you about improvements to our athletic facilities that we know are behind our neighbors and others in our conference? We know we have the dilemma of the ice arena that we are working to solve. You've got some data on that. I know Dr. Lifto is very skilled at answering the nuanced questions about the data, and I want you to take advantage of him while he's with us tonight. We are able to call Dr. Lifto at any point if we have a series of questions. Say, what would your insight be to this? I know that Don would give us his insight at that point, but you have him here tonight. So I hope that we take advantage of that chance for you to just dig into anything that you're wondering about. We're not going to solve it tonight, right? But we are going to be able to start the process of really thinking about what does this data tell for us about what we could be able to do.
Okay, thank you. Board members, do you have any questions, or comments? Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Thank you for the report. When you asked about the tax impact, did you frame it only in a yearly amount or did you break it down by month?
I'm gonna look to make sure that I don't answer that incorrectly. The probes used what's called a hybrid approach, which means, I'll give you an example, property taxes will increase about $6 a month or $75 per year for a home valued at approximately 300,000. So when you use both the monthly and the annual together, that's called a hybrid approach, and that's what was done.
Does that give different results versus just using the yearly or just the monthly?
In surveys that only use the annual amount, that would provide a somewhat more conservative estimate on what's feasible. Because as you might imagine, it's kind of a retail thing. But you react differently to $6 a month than you do to $72.
And for the ice arena, when it was talked about as 833, was that, did the people understand that's additional to the school costs?
If they were listening carefully, the answer is yes, because the word additional was actually in the probe. It would be an additional amount of that much.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Questions or comments? You have Amy?
Thank you for your presentation and for doing all this work for us. It's all very interesting. I have several questions. The first is just curiosity. How do you get people to answer their phones?
Well, if we get voicemail, there is a message left on the voicemail that said, I'm calling from Morris Leatherman, a survey firm engaged by the Northfield Public Schools to ask your opinions. I'm not saying this exactly right, but you get the idea, to get opinions about important things that are coming up facing the district. Please call back if you can, and we'll arrange a time for you to do the interview. So there is a voicemail left for people, and a lot of people who let it go to voicemail will call back later and do the interview.
What percentage of people actually will respond to that voicemail and call back?
I don't have that specific to your.
In general, is it high? Is it?
I would say generally speaking, at least a third do respond and schedule an interview. Yep. So some survey companies, just as a follow-up on your question, don't leave a voicemail. And of course, that has a very different result in terms of reaching people.
What does your caller ID say?
It's a 651 number.
It's just a number. Okay. Then I was looking at the past voting activity results, and one of the things I was curious about was sort of a weighting of those categories, because you know, if the people who vote 6 to 9 times in the last 9 votes, they were, you know, 50% of the population, they'd have much more impact on our decision than if they're 20% of the population.
Yep, the past voting patterns was one of the demographic controls in the study. So we looked at the past voting patterns of all registered voters living within the boundaries of the school district. And if 20% of them were in the very active category, then roughly 20% of the interviews for your survey were with that group. So they were proportionate to the district as a whole.
So you're saying weighting really wouldn't make, it is sort of intrinsically weighted by the process.
In the case of past voting patterns, that was one of the demographic controls. So the demographic makeup of the sample mirrored the demographic makeup of everybody.
Then, since Northfield has 2 colleges, I just assumed that we had a higher number of people with graduate degrees living in our area. And I was wondering if you knew if that was true or not, because I was actually dismayed to see the people with graduate degrees were less interested in supporting education.
Yeah. I don't have comparative information on that, but I would be shocked if your intuition wasn't correct. And remember, I did comment a couple times that the vast majority of people in that category were also older, and older voters tend to not be as supportive in most cases.
Okay, that's all for now. Thank you.
I have a question too, Jeff. And I just wanted to hear clarification on a question that, this last question that you were asking, Amy, so that people with graduate degrees can, were less supportive of paying having a tax increase. They were not less supportive of education. Would you say that's right?
The way that it turned out in the survey, the people with the graduate degrees, I think on all the slides you saw, were somewhat less supportive as compared to others. But the statistic I had referenced, I'm just going to read it to make sure I get it right. Of the group that had the graduate degree, 40% were over 65 years old, and an additional 25% were over 55 years old. So in my opinion, it's not, I have a graduate degree, which makes me less supportive of the district. It has more to do with the age of those respondents.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to get an understanding, and maybe I'm, splitting hairs here, but that they are supportive of our district and of education, but not supportive of this project or some of this project.
In general, and I think this would be true based on your survey results as well, the older the residents are, the more tepid they're going to be about responding to tax increases.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for your report. I just kind of was wondering if you had any general comments about we're basically a rural district, but we're, from the metro, kind of the next thing down as far as where we're located is the metro and then the next down. So what are some what are some things that you see or would expect versus metropolitan district versus a rural district when you're surveying? Any just general comments on that?
Yeah. The generality would be, at least in Minnesota, the more rural a school district is, the more conservative they're going to be on embracing projects that require tax increases.
And I would say that if you have the tax base, it depends on, if that is necessarily there or not. But I agree with you on that, I guess, and not that that's the point, but yeah, just a very insightful information. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone have a comment or a question? Go ahead, Corey.
Thanks for being here, Dr. Lithel. Just have one question for you. Clarification. When you're talking about the potential tax impact, you said $125 is the average. Is that an average of all property values, or that was the average for just specific to $300,000 home value? I just want to be clear on that.
All 4 of the tax impacts that were tested were for a home valued at approximately $300,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Anyone else? I'm gonna go with Julie and then Amy. Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you also for the report. I had two questions. You alluded to a response of undecided. And for the sake of the results, were those grouped under no opinion? Or if someone specifically said undecided, how was that noted in? Since we don't have that obviously that response,
Yeah.
but was it put into no opinion?
I think that the undecided and it would be the combination of the undecided and no opinion.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, within the areas where you broke down the support, you had Dundas, and I'll turn off my microphone so you don't have to hear my. So where you noted in the different voting precincts, you have Dundas grouped, Dundas/Bridgewater, but then noted townships, and Bridgewater is a township. So was Bridgewater Township put in with Dundas?
It would be the other townships not listed by name.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then my other question is, and I think you've alluded to this in that when we talk about the voting support by voting activity, that's, the categories of less active and very active. We don't know what those demographics are. Or do we have a way of knowing what those demographics are? So within the very active, do we know, or is there a way to know what that specific demographic is?
They can be cross-referenced, yes. Not by name, but by
Sure, in
by
terms of,
characteristic.
Educational level, income.
Yep.
Maybe home ownership, all of the other categories.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Amy.
I'm just checking to make sure I understand the tax impact. And I think I do, but I'm just going to ask you. So one of the things that we have happening is we have a certain amount of tax coming off the rolls. And so we have like $40 million coming off, and that's why we're sort of timing this as it is. What you're talking about here, the questions were in addition to what they currently have. So that would change how much we could see as a possible expenditure, because we've already sort of covered $40 million.
Yeah, but if I'm understanding your question correctly, the tax impacts that were tested in the survey were not net of the tax reduction that's associated with that $40 million dropping off. When you get to the point where you're deciding what you're going to do and how you're going to communicate with people, you're going to have to communicate that effectively, because the ballot, no matter what you decide to do, the ballot is not going to net that out for you either. So I guess the short answer is that those are just, potential increases. They do not consider the $40 million reduction that you referred to.
Thank you. That's what I was thinking, and I appreciate you confirming that.
Anyone else? Corey.
I was just going to say that with some of these detailed questions, I did provide your superintendent with a supplementary report this week. It's not what you saw tonight. We call it a detailed demographic report. And with the detailed demographic report, I think it's 44 pages. If you like peeling the onion back, you'll love that report. So what you can do is look at every single question in the survey and then look at it and say, how did women respond compared to men? How did young people respond compared to older? How did people in ward whatever respond versus something else? So you'll have all the real detailed information for every single question in that report that you'll be getting probably this week sometime.
Yeah, so the report was not ready for distribution before today, so I anticipate I'll get it to board members probably on Wednesday.
Go ahead, Corey, and then I'll call on Amy.
And this is one of those onion questions. So with respect to the reaction to impacts, there's the number listed for no difference. Do we have an indication if those are positive or negative response prior to the additional information? Because 79 plus 7 in the positive way is significant versus, 71 the other way.
I'm not sure if can you
So for those who had no difference in their opinion after
oh,
receiving additional
okay.
information, do we have any idea if those were positive responses prior to more information or negative? Because obviously seeing 79% who were somewhat more likely or much more likely is great. But if we know it's another 7%, that's even better if they were no different because they're already on board with the support.
Yeah, the short answer is I don't know. That may be something that can be cross-referenced, however.
Amy?
So my question is, what do we know about the people who responded no opinion? Because hopefully those would be people we could educate and bring them on board with any plans that we put forth. And so I'm just curious who they are.
Well, you'll get most of that answered when you dig into the report that I just referenced that your superintendent said you'd have on Wednesday, because you're going to see all of that information broken down by demography for every single question. So hold that thought until Wednesday.
Anyone else? Any more comments or questions?
Can I just like, Dr. Lithgow, could you just explain how your experience, and if you would share with people ballpark, how many of these surveys have you conducted personally over time? I know it's probably in the hundreds, so I want people to hear that because I want people to hear the expertise we have with us. And then I'd like you to talk about your experience in the confidence level that you have in that dollar figure, the tax tolerance number. If you could just describe for the board and the folks here listening, just tell us how many surveys you've done like this and what does your experience tell you about how solid is that number, of 135, which you've shared. What are the things and the conditions where you've seen where districts have been able to get more than what that solid number was, and circumstances where maybe even that number may have not been successful at polls?
Well, a few reference points related to your question. I've been working on survey projects of this kind for close to 25 years. I did my PhD work at the U in this general area. In terms of how confident can we be in the results and the data, if we looked at the last 2 years, so I'm talking about 2020 and 2021, the results of the surveys, 19 out of 21 of the surveys that I was involved with, the actual vote on election day fell within the margin of error of what the survey predicted. So if the survey predicted there was going to be 55% support, plus or minus that 5, 19 out of 21, the actual vote on election day fell in that range. So I would consider that to be pretty good in terms of, accuracy. And if you went back in the 2 years before that, it was very similar. Is it perfect? No. Is it better than guessing? Much better than guessing. In terms of that 135 number, the 135 recommendation does not mean that you couldn't win at a higher number. It also is no guarantee that you're going to win at 135. The two variables that are most significant is the data was collected in late September. What's going to be the condition of our world, of our state, of our school district, of our economy, of inflation when people vote? Is it going to be worse, the same, or better? So that the economic reality of when election time comes is very, very important. And unfortunately, unless you know something, a source that I'm not aware of, nobody knows. But that's a very important variable. The second variable is how well are you going to do as a district getting people engaged in the campaign once you decide what you're going to do, when, and what's going to be on the ballot. Are you going to run an A campaign, a C campaign? Part of that has to do with your history and what you've done in the past would give you some indication of that. Some of it has to do with your resolve. But it goes without saying that districts that run A campaigns have better success on election day than districts that don't. Now, I'm not ignoring the economy. It's both. Sometimes there are local things that come up that affect things as well. I worked with a district that had pretty good survey and things were looking pretty good. And about 2 weeks before election day, their biggest employer went bankrupt and closed the door. So stuff happens. But the economic factors and what kind of a campaign you're going to run are most important. The 135, I would not suggest you see that as an absolute ceiling. But it's also true, the further north you go, the thinner the ice will be. So, does that make sense?
Very good. Okay, Tom.
Well, I was thinking of it. So we have 2 colleges in town and you talk to college students who can be transitory. And how many other communities have you worked with that have a lot of college students, and what's their impact in the numbers, how they play out?
Yep. Well, my most recent example is I did 2 surveys for Bloomington, Indiana. One in 2021 and one in 2022. They will be on the ballot in November of this year. They have lots of college students, and some of those college students are registered to vote in Indiana, and some are registered to vote in their home state. And I also did 4 previous surveys for Bloomington for earlier referenda that they ran. And I can tell you, with using that as an example, part of their campaign effort was to engage with and encourage college students to participate in the election.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you so much, Dr. Lifto.
Well, good luck as you move forward. And as your superintendent said, if you think of some questions later on, just send them to him and he'll get them to me and we'll get them answered. So best wishes and thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item B, which is the Superintendent Operations and Strategic Plan Update.
Yes, if you can just give me one moment here. Okay, here we go. So this month's update, which we have it's too bad, we have some good stuff. Most of the crowd left. I don't have the same kind of drawing power that Don Lifto has, but that's okay.
Wow.
So I just want to take a moment, and when we have people who hit extraordinary milestones in public education, we think that we need to recognize that. And so this week, Jim Posh retires after 40 years with Northfield Public Schools. So he'll retire on October 31st. Jim was a custodian at Northfield High School, and at Spring Creek Elementary, started in 1982. He was the head custodian at Spring Creek, of course, then called Sibley Elementary in 1995 through 97. He moved to Bridgewater in 97 as the head custodian, was the high school head custodian in 1999. And then 5 years later, he was promoted to being the district's maintenance coordinator. And that's the position he's currently held until later this month. And I think we just don't see that kind of longevity a ton in public education. And Jim is one of the people that you just can rely on. We could tell you literally scores of stories of something that happened at a building at 10 o'clock at night, where if Jim wasn't there to come in and patch it or figure it out to how can we make it, there would have been many times where school could not have been conducted at that building the next day had he not come in. And so Jim took calls at all hours of the day, night, weekends. And when there was something that was going to prevent students from being able to engage in their education, he's there. He's very resourceful, right? I mean, able to make a lot of different fixes. His work is going to be missed. So when we have a strategic commitment to people, and when we have someone who has given and never asked for any recognition, right? Never asked, and just, very much what can I do to get the job done? And so I want to publicly thank Jim for his work and congratulate him on a well-deserved retirement. So thank you, Jim, for your outstanding commitment to the Northfield School District. I wanted to share a little bit about our family engagement plan. So as we have all talked about a number of times during the pandemic, we have discussed what are the lessons that we will take from the pandemic. And I think everyone has had a variety of different thoughts about things that would last, as the pandemic exited. I think we all prognosticated, we all had some things that we thought. I'm still to tell you that I don't think any of us really know, what that impact will be, but we are starting to see some of the things that we feel are important to take advantage of that learning. And one is family engagement. So because the pandemic forced us to be able to engage families differently in a variety of different ways, we put together a work team that you are familiar with, our work team model. We put together a work team this summer to talk about how could we expand and leverage some different things that we learned around family engagement, taking into account the history of family. Notice I'm using the term family engagement very intentionally versus things like parent-teacher conferences or even parent communication, because engagement is upon us to try to meet the needs of people in a variety of different ways. So the work team came forward with several recommendations. They were provided with parameters of how they needed to conduct their work to make sure it stayed within the contract with the Teachers Association, to make sure that it stayed within a variety of different financial protocols, et cetera. And we are excited to implement these changes for this year. Some are fairly small, some much more substantial, but they all respond in some way, shape, or form to feedback and or data. So I just want to be really clear about just a couple of things here tonight at a high level. When it comes to elementary school families, and I want to just take one step back, our family conferences that we held in August, that is the kickoff to family engagement, right? To start the year on the positive note in an in-person way is something that we are really committed to. We think that how you start that relationship is so important. So the way that we did family conferences in August, that was the beginning of the plan. Then as we get into the regular school year, elementary school families are going to have some greater flexibility in how they engage with their child's classroom teacher than they would have in the past. In the past, we would say, here are the 2 nights for parent-teacher conferences, come on in, 15-minute increments, and then people are out the door. It was a tough deal for a lot of folks, including our teaching staff, who 2 12-hour days in 1 week typically was tiring when you are trying to manage a classroom of 5 or 6-year-olds all day. So that was a piece of data we took, or a piece of feedback we took into consideration. We also know that there are some cases where a teacher will be communicating with a parent once a week. So in that case, there might need to be some more flexibility for what does that conference, if you will, look like. We know that there are still some people who are hesitant to come into the public space due to concerns about the virus, et cetera. There are some people who using Zoom actually is more convenient for them because of their work schedule. So it allows some greater flexibility. So there are elementary conferences. There's a window in which teachers complete those conferences right now. It's around a 5-day window, roughly 5 workday window that includes the 2 workdays that are in between our quarters. And so teachers have families have the ability to find out what works for each individual family. So it's different in terms of the office doesn't schedule these. These are scheduled and worked on together between the teacher and the parents. It can take place in the format of a phone call. It can take place in the format of a Zoom call. It can take place in the form of face-to-face. And we want to try to meet those families where they're at. We also understand that from time to time, there are going to be people who say thanks, but no thanks. We've always had that, right? And so in those cases, our staff will make a good faith effort to be able to make that connection, but we also know that you cannot force people to do this. So very similar to how we've conducted it in the past, but with some more options and some greater flexibility. The larger of the 2 changes will be at the middle school, high school, and area learning center. And as you know, for years, many people on this board saw the percentage of families who attended middle and high school parent-teacher conferences. And the older the student gets, the less percentage of families attend. And so we really feel the need to try to reach out and change the dynamic so that we can have an ongoing conversation, with families. So the biggest change is that the traditional evening parent-teacher conferences are not scheduled this year. And again, when you're getting 20% or so of people to come, when you are in a cafeteria, we think some people are hesitant because no matter how discreet you attempt to be, if you've got a line of 10 people behind you and you're talking with the family, it's hard for people not to overhear. We tried to fix that by putting people in classrooms. Well, think about being a parent, trying to find all of those high school classrooms in that building, right? We know that can be, once people figure it out, we can get them there. But even so, then people are worried. How much time do I have? Is there a line out the door? Even when people are in that building at night, when it's quiet, people can still hear, what the conference is happening. So we're trying to change the rules, if you will, to get more engagement. So what the basic plan is that we are asking teachers to connect with every one of their students' families at least twice during the year. And that can, again, there's a variety of different tools that people can use to do that. We are working on the tracking mechanism for that. Of course, a face-to-face conference is one of those options, but it could be using talking points. It could be a phone call. It could be an email. It could be a handwritten postcard. It can be a number of different things, and teachers are tracking the ways that they're doing that. We're also working on ensuring that families know what the content and the curriculum is. So that was starting at the high school, for example, where during family conferences, parents could come and follow their child's schedule, hear directly from the teacher about the syllabus, about what the expectations were. And then twice per year, families are going to get a curriculum update in terms of here's what's coming up in this class over the next couple of months, et cetera. So trying to make sure that they're being communicated with in a variety of different ways. Also trying to help teach people that there are ways that they can passively get the information. So helping people understand they can sign up for the once a week Skyward update that sends grades or sends missing assignments, alerts families if the student's grade drops below a certain percentage. So there's some other technology that can be used to help keep parents informed. Now, we don't just make a change and don't have a plan to be able to measure it. So we are using a couple of questions from our parent engagement survey that demonstrated the need for something different. A couple of weeks after the end of the first quarter, we'll do a pulse survey with families at the middle school, high school, and ALC to say, hey, how do you now respond, to these questions? Much like what Dr. Lifto said, here is the uninformed opinion, and now you've got some additional opportunity. We'll try to see what that difference is. We're not going to, make an about face after one pulse survey, but we think it's going to give us some information there. So I really wanted the board, I've shared a little bit about this before with you in the summer, but I really wanted just to emphasize we're here now and we know what that means. Now people are paying, well, we want to make sure, in case you have people who ask, well, how come you're not having those formal parent teacher conference nights this year? Well, here's why. We're trying to engage people in more of an ongoing conversation as opposed to this once time for families. Portage, they are going to continue to do the things the way that they've done it because their circumstances are the same. They do a lot more. They have to do a lot more ongoing parent communication because of that need for that partnership. And finally, when you get to the NCEC and you're talking about 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds, that is dependent upon the program. And so parents will receive additional information from their child's teacher. So that is just the report on the family engagement plan. Capital projects levy, we just continue to do the things that we do. Dr. Lifto talks about running an A campaign, and when he and I talked about that earlier today, I had to really do some thinking. Are we running an A campaign? And I believe that we are. We are doing all of the things that we think that we need to do. We're hitting people in a variety of different ways. We are sending direct mail. We've had information in the newspaper. We've had it on KYMN in terms of the interviews that we've had with Jeff Johnson. We are able, we have to pay for some advertising to make sure that people are aware. This is informational, right? We're not advocating, but we have purchased a substantial number of radio spots on KYMN. It's an inexpensive way to be able to get the word out to a specific part of our population. So we're doing all of those things. We've done quite a few presentations already. There are more presentations coming up. If you've not seen it enough, I'm sure you're welcome at the Community Education Advisory Council tomorrow afternoon at, I think it's 4 o'clock. So feel free to come by on that one if you haven't heard that enough. And then we have another PTO, and then we are working to do some presentations yet at Carleton and at St. Olaf. We're working through that process to be able to help make sure that if college students are participating in this local election, which they're allowed to by law, that they know what is being asked for and that they are able to vote in an informed method. So we continue to work on the capital projects levy, and if board members would like to see me do more or something different, please let me know. We're following the pattern that we've used with other successful levies in the past from the informational campaign. And so I feel we're about where we normally are. We didn't stick a bunch of logos on popcorn boxes because they went away from popcorn boxes. Now, what we did in one campaign is on all of the boxes of popcorn that were sold at a football game, we put a sticker on them, just reminding people to vote. They no longer have those boxes. Now they have bags. It's a little bit more difficult. So that was one thing we did before that we haven't done now. But I think you see the point is that we are out and really trying to make sure that people have the information that they need. I also wanted just to give you a brief update on the curriculum and instructional review cycle. Last fall, you heard a report from Hope Langston about how we have rebooted that very important management part of our district. And so in the report, it just shares with you that we have the high school career and technical education, middle school science, and PE and health teams that have completed phase 1 of the process to guide in the new adoption of curricular materials and some CTE equipment, which I've shared with you that was adopted as a result. They're moving into phase 2 of that CERC cycle. We have some other groups that are beginning phase 1, including grades 6 through 12, English language arts, music, family, consumer science, and business education. And so the reason that I want to share this with you is that the important thing about a cycle is that the cycle, you look at it as the flywheel, and that it starts to turn, and then it just continues to turn and it continues to move, and that you're hitting those targets in the way that they're intended. And we are. And it's important work. It's interesting work. We're learning a lot. We're uncovering. We're helping clarify. We're helping people really think about, their instructional practice as much, if not more so, than the materials that they use to do that. So really a credit to Hope Langston and the instructional services team who are all doing this work together. And I just wanted to give that update to you that process continues along. Noel, did you have a question? Okay. Thanks, Noel. Finally, we did have I wanted to give one shout out to Prairie Creek in that that is a key partnership that we have. And Prairie Creek has done some really great work around their multi-age all school book clubs that are focused on some pieces that are specific to their goals as a school. And they were recognized and are presenting, they did present that work at a national conference. And so we like to be able to share that with you when one of our charter schools does those kinds of things. So that is my report for the evening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Nice, thank you. Remember, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, Julie.
I just wanted to comment on the overall operations and strategic plan board update that you give at every meeting. I think it's just really, it's an excellent report always, and I think it really points to the excellent work you're doing. And I just have to say that for those of us who have had the privilege of working with you, it wasn't a matter of if, but a matter of when you would be given the prestigious honor of Minnesota State Superintendent of the Year. And so I think that this report demonstrates just how student-centered, focused you are, families and staff, and just overall strength of leadership and really passion for the work you do. So I just really appreciate this update. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. other questions or comments that people have? Oh,
Cory.
you should be asking that. I'm sorry.
Just want to give kudos on the evolving and dynamic communication approach that the district has. You know, as involved with the district as a parent for, I think, 8 or 9 years now. And as we become more of a digital world, I think the adaptation's been really good. And just today, I received 3 different messages concerning this very engagement plan. I received a text, I received an email, and I received a seesaw notification. So they found me one place or another. So kudos to all the administration and the educators in the district who are carrying this plan out.
And I really appreciate the comment, Corey. And I do want to just point out that change is also hard, right? So I do anticipate, that we will get some feedback, both positive, like what Corey has just shared, but because there's some change and because people haven't experienced this new approach yet, there's that uncertainty that people have. Well, will I get the same information? Will I have that? And so I do think that that's part of what we may hear, and that's okay, right? So I think we're going to hear a lot of those kinds of things. I had a secondary parent who reached out to me last week who said that they've received more information about their secondary students' academic progress so far in the first 6 weeks of school than all of their previous time at a secondary school combined. I've also heard from at least one parent who said, I haven't gotten anything yet. And so that there's going to be a range of experiences as we try to systemize this. So I do think overall it's going to be very positive, but we have to help people adapt, to use a very good word that you used.
Nice. Amy.
Well, I think it's all very exciting too, but I'm also remembering, and I might have been on the board too long now, but hearing about the middle school getting very high parent returns for, I think it was the follow your kid's schedule night. And it sounds like there's no longer that particular evening. And I'm just wondering, it seemed like they, at least pre-COVID, they had a really big success, and how that, if you could talk about how that's evolving, because I remember as a parent, that was very helpful to go from class to class.
So that happened at the high school. That option of following your student's schedule, that was the way the high school did their family conferences this year, just to be clear. And then the middle school continues to evolve. And it will continue to evolve this way as we continue to see implementation of Avid at the middle school. So during the pandemic, every teacher had what was called the VIEW class, right? So this is a group of students who the teachers are required to reach out to and do some intentional communication with. So that is the groups of students that at the beginning of the year during family conferences, people came in, middle school families came in to meet with that VIEW teacher, that those VIEW teachers were all trained in how to deliver information in a way that could have been similar, but also allowed parents to have, hey, I really want you to know this about my kid, and can you pass this along? So it was a little bit more of a personal connection than following the middle school schedule was. And the determination, I think is fair to say by the middle school administration, is that there's such that dynamic change of middle school in going from the elementary context where you're really working with one person to where now my child is working with 5, 6, 7 teachers in a day. And that VIEW approach, meeting with one teacher, is something that is helpful to ease in that transition. So there's also been some very good response to that approach as well, Amy. So that's at the beginning of the year.
So the VIEW teacher then is their main contact with the school.
For
Or
that
whatever.
first conference right now, right? And they don't continue that now. They did that in the pandemic, but now through the year, each individual teacher is going to be connecting with their individual students.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions and comments. Anyone else? All right. We are moving on to item C, which is a request for an additional English language learner support staff member, and Hope is going to present. This is an addition from the table file.
Good evening, everybody. As you know, following our budget prioritization process last year, we've been keeping a very close eye on our EL student count. And we are currently at, as of today, 195 students in the district, which last year we were at 211. No, actually last year we're at 229, and the lowest ever in the last 15 years, 211. So our count did drop again this year, but I'm here tonight seeking additional support because of a particular need in our enrollment, and that is in new to country arrivals, or MDE's term now, recently arrived English learners, RAILs. And so we are in a situation that we could not predict, and that we had a high number of new to countries coming to the high school and enrolling, and then a little uptick at Spring Creek as well. Spring Creek was already hitting the ceiling of where we wanted to be for FTE to student ratio. And so I've met with the teams and looked at the needs, and the high school is really seeking EA support to help in core content classes for these new to country students that are attending their math classes. Math in particular is the need. And then Spring Creek, and meeting with that EL staff member, she would really prefer help at the end of the day to make the group smaller so that she can get in all the minutes that our LEAP plan requires for her English language learners that are specifically new to country or level 1. Those students have the highest level of minutes required in our current LEAP plan. So the proposal you have in front of you just details out where we are at right now with FTE. And I want to say that kudos to the EL staff, because we knew we had to come at it with some flexible thinking this year. So you will see that we shifted an FTE from Spring Creek to GVP to cover numbers prior to the school year. We also are sharing FTE between the ALC, which had lower numbers than we anticipated this year, to GVP. The staff has been great in working together and problem solving some of these new changes. But at this point, we believe we have done everything we can to maximize the instructional minutes that we currently have. And we believe that this support is necessary because of this uptick in newly arrived EL students in our district.
Thank you, Hope. Did you want to add some
Yeah,
comments?
I just want to add that, we are, this is, again, we're bringing this to you tonight as a discussion or report to follow our normal process of sharing it with you, and then we will bring it back to the next meeting for approval. But I just wanted to, I know that this was in the table file. We are doing some additional analysis, not we, let's be clear. Hope was doing some additional analysis late last week, so that's why it's in the table file tonight. And I encourage you to ask Hope any questions that you have about it, but we're not seeking approval tonight. We would seek approval at that next meeting.
Okay, yes, Julie.
So thank you, Hope, for bringing this forward. And I think it's really, a testament to the work that you did last year in really identifying where we had to, reposition and be sure we were aligned. But now we, have some needs we have to address. New to country. So we haven't heard that. I was thinking the last time we heard new to country was when Mary Grace Hansen had done a presentation. So I feel a little, admittedly not as up to speed. And I just wondered from like a reporting standpoint, if they are a separate cell size, just some of the ways that we track, as long as we're reviewing this particular group of students and their obvious needs, how you have to address that in terms of reporting, accountability, obviously MDE. And then a question for Val, is there any sort of funding stream that anything is carved out? I'm sure I know the answer to that, but for new to country or actually relatively recently arrived English learners, RAILs. So I guess in the grand scheme of things, how are RAILs students tracked, and any other sort of information about this particular set of students?
So that's a great question. And RAIL is the new acronym. New to country just makes more sense to people. When I say recently arrived English learners, people stare at me blankly, right? And so I tend to go back to that old term, which was retired by MD, which is new to country. So recently arrived English learners are tracked separately. There is no additional funding source that comes with them. We are required to just identify them for MDE, just for reporting purposes. And then there is no guidance on best practice for FTE per student or minutes per student. Each district develops their own language plan. And so we have identified minutes for that particular subset of kids. And they are pretty hefty minutes as they learn to acclimate to a new country and a new school. But as far as MDE goes, we just simply identify them. We did change our identification process this summer based on feedback, both primarily from families. And so we began calling families, any family who has an English language or a home language questionnaire that has a language other than English. Past practice has been screen for EL. We know that there's been some discomfort with that in our families, in the community. So Sebastian Brissett, he was a great help, and myself, we just started calling families this summer to say, okay, here's your home language questionnaire. This is what the process that's triggered by those responses. And just some interesting data, because I think this is going to be really good to track over time. Of the 84 summer enrollees that had a home language other than English, 36%, sorry, were filled out in error. Parents made every best effort to fill that home language survey out correctly. And they just didn't realize it didn't mean your child was in a immersion program. They had a grandmother who speaks another language. They have a nanny. So 36% qualified, ended up being screened and qualified. And the remainder, 14% parents said, please don't screen my child. I don't want them screened. 4% were exited and 11% were screened and did not qualify for EL services. So we believe that this process of inviting the parents to the table from day one to engage in the conversation about what their home language activity and preference is, was really helpful and beneficial. It doesn't really apply here, except to know that we are really getting a fuller picture of students when they come into our district. So these recently arrived students, again, if it worked to speak with the family, we did that and screen those students, and they followed the typical process. But I think it's important to point out that the process is more comprehensive now. So we're pretty happy about that.
Excellent, thank you. I just have one follow-up question. So in your conversations with HR Director Molly Wieselman, what is the sense for being able to fill this position? As I know, we've had a lot of vacancies and need for educational assistants.
So I'm working with Sebastian to fill this, and I'm optimistic. I don't think everybody else around me is as optimistic, but all we can do is go for it. And we'll see what happens. But the fact that this was the model that the team wanted to follow, that they believe this would best suit their students' needs at this point in time, made me want to go this direction.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Corey?
Just trying to anticipate something beyond today's position request. So looking at the middle school number, we're at 28 to 1.
Mhm.
And I know our range is 28 to 30. We'd like to stay in. How many students would it take to get above 30? Is it 1? Is it 2?
So we'd need 2 more. There's 1 teacher at
Okay, so
the
2
middle
more
school
kids
right
will-
now. Yeah.
Okay.
And you're right, we're watching it closely. We have a live Tableau dashboard that, tells me the breakdown of the language need of the students. But yeah, we're watching.
Right, Amy?
Thanks for bringing this request forward. How many students do we have that are considered recently arrived to the country? And then I'm wondering, how long are they considered that? Is it only the first year, or is it a skills level question, or how does that work?
Right now, that's a great question, Amy. Right now, we have our 4, 7, 9, 10, 11, 15, right, spread among the schools. Great question. Students are only considered recently arrived for 1 year. And so, and the reason why they are tight on that timeline is everything to do with the MCA. So recently arrived learners actually sit for the MCA. They did not used to sit for the MCA reading. Now they sit for their MCA tests. They're now counted in our accountability. There's no growth calculation for them. But after the first year, then they are included in our population.
It's interesting.
Yeah, super interesting.
And so I'm also wondering about this position that you're requesting. Is it just going to last through the end of this academic year, or is it seen as a more permanent position?
We are looking just through the end of this academic year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great questions. Anyone else? Hope, you had just said that there's 11 new students that are new to country.
15, actually.
15, okay. And then the greater amount of them are at the high school. I'm seeing there's 7.
Yes.
And so would the EA be split with the different buildings or mostly at the high school?
So the way the schedule works, and this was shockingly in alignment, is that Spring Creek needs additional help from 1:30 to 3. The high school needs more help with math classes in periods prior to that. So the EA would support the students in their math classes at the high school and then go over to Spring Creek to finish the day.
And the students at the high school needing particularly help in math or all
Yes.
in the same math classes?
There's a few sprinkled in different sections throughout the morning.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Hope.
All right.
Okay, we're gonna move on to item 6, which is committee reports. Amy is presenting a committee report, and then Julie. Well, all board members serve on various committees and can provide a report at any of our second meeting of the month board meetings. So Amy, would you like to present?
Certainly, I have 2 reports in today's meeting. The first one is the SEVSEC board report, and it's pretty much self-explanatory. That's off to a good year. They're having some issues hiring enough EAs. They are also at getting to their limits of the number of students that they can have enrolled. It all depends on the grade and the program that they're going to be in. So I'll talk about that briefly. Right now, there are 89 students that are enrolled in SEVSEC, and they come from 4 different school districts: Northfield, Faribault, Medford, and Owatonna. And each school district has one of their school board members on the board of SEVSEC. So obviously I represent Northfield. And then from the students themselves can be anywhere from kindergarten through age 21. Most of them are in their sort of middle school and high school years. And they have 3 different programs at SEVSEC. So 19 of those 89 students come from Northfield, and the 3 different programs that they are in, 11, so the biggest number, are in the program they call ALEX, which is the program for emotional and behavioral disabilities. So that's our biggest group, and they're going to be mostly the middle school, high school age. We have one in the SUN program, which stands for Students with Unique Needs, and those would be the students who have extreme physical disabilities. And then we have 7 in the STEP program, and those are all 18 to 21-year-olds who they may have graduated from high school, but they're allowed to have up to age 21 additional education, learning life skills and things like that. So that's how that breaks down. Does anybody have any questions about my report? All right, I will move on to my second report. And that is the Wellness Committee. Again, The Wellness Committee meets quarterly and has 13 members in the various parts of the school district, from various schools in the district, and 2 high school students. And we're led by Stephanie Stromey, and we just discuss different ways that we can encourage wellness in the district. And so you can see some of the ideas that we came up with this year. Talking about possibly helping out with Carrie Dubois has a Bring Change to Mind Flex opportunity to see if there's any way we can help with that, to see if there's any way we can help with Portage and the wellness of the Portage students. And also, we're very curious about the social emotional survey results, which should be either in now, recently, or very soon. So we'll meet again in January.
Thank you, Amy. Tom, do you have a question?
Yeah. Have you figured out how to gauge the Portage students' response or?
That's a good question that since this was the first meeting of the academic year, we were just discussing ideas about what we would like to see the committee do and what information we're interested in. So at this point, we've asked Stephanie to approach the people in the Portage program and see what their needs are and see whether there's a way we can help support them.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Julie, will you present?
Yes, thank you. So I'm presenting a report on the Communications Advisory Committee. Just to recap, the purpose of the committee is to prioritize the district's message, engaging stakeholder groups to inspire community action in support of our vision, advancing the district's local, statewide, and national image. And clearly, it's in line with our district strategic commitment of effective and transparent communication. So nicely noted, Corey talked about the amount of information he's been getting, and our Communications Advisory Committee members noted that same increase in amount and timing of communication from the district and through a number of mediums. So that's really great. And I think when Dr. Hillman carefully laid out family engagement, obviously, and his cascading communication approach has really been effective and really moving the needle there. Couple ways that the district is using electronic media to increase family engagement. The district launched the use of Samore, which is a digital newsletter that provides our schools the ability to create an engaging newsletter. So the newsletters that go home from each of the buildings now are much more engaging graphically, and they allow for embedded photos, videos, particular graphics around a specific school, a lot easier for staff and administrators to put that newsletter together, and again, hopefully engaging more families in reading it, just because it looks a lot more exciting and provides a lot of great information. Also, the use of that digital newsletter really provides a consistent look throughout the district. So if you have kids in a number of different buildings, you're seeing that same communication communicated in that same way. And Dr. Hillman did allude to the number of ways that we can communicate with families, including emails, Skyward, Schoology, talking points, and Seesaw, as well as information on the district website. So at this point, the district is taking a look at a number of ways that we do communicate, and is that a negative or is that a positive with all of the ways that we have of communicating and engaging our families. Dr. Lithgow talked about different ways that his voter survey spoke about how they get district information, and Nuger Communications is part of this Communications Advisory Committee to talk about the work they do for the district. And it was really great to get our metrics around social media usage, and the district, from the time period of May through just this October, from the previous year, we saw a really significant increase in the amount of visits we had to our social media sites, including Facebook and Instagram. Facebook was up 41.3% and Instagram up 141.7%. So they're seeing increases in the amount of page likes, increased frequency of postings, and increased amount of people-centered stories that has really driven that. The district, with thanks to Dr. Hillman and Anita, none of this work would really be getting done as well as it is without their dedication and hard work, because we don't have a communications person in this district as many districts do. So it really falls on those two to really see that a lot of this information is communicated to Nuger and to others who are able to communicate it more broadly to our families and community. And one thing that Dr. Hillman and Anita were able to implement this year is having each building have a social media captain. And so that person at the building is responsible for providing 1 to 2 stories each month that would include photos. And again, where we're seeing really a lot of interest from our families is when we're talking about human interest stories, highlighting staff. Obviously, the retirement of Jim Posh, as an example, is things that people really like to see from the district. And so getting those stories and getting them posted takes a lot of work. And so again, huge kudos to Dr. Hillman and Anita for making that happen. So overall, the committee felt that there just has been really great strides made in terms of our communication. And when we hear plans from Dr. Hillman around increased family engagement, we know that, that will likely increase where families are seeing the strength of our communication. So I will take any questions. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Excellent. Nice job. All right, we're on to item 7, which is our consent agenda. As a reminder, there were some personal items in the table file added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Yes, Amy.
I'm not exactly answering your question. I don't want to pull anything from the consent grouping because I think it's all important in there. But as I was going through the policies that have just been updated, there were several of them that had substantial changes on it that were mandated by law. So, and I understand there's an urgency behind them to get them, especially the drug use and the policies 417 and 418, because the laws just changed. The other one I'm interested in is policy 722, which is the public data policy. And I know we're trying to figure out how to make this new system work. So I want to encourage us to pass them in the consent grouping, but also have the opportunity sooner than later for the policy committee, which we already recently just did all of these 3 policies, to take one more look at it and make sure that we feel that the changes that were made fit with all of our earlier discussions.
One more look at,
At policies 417, 418, and 722.
well, what we can do is pull those.
I don't want to slow down the approval process though, because especially with the chemical free, with the 417 and 418, I know that's important to have. There's been so many changes at the state level with the drug use and with edibles and things like that, that I think it's important that we have a current policy in place, but I still also think it's important that the policy committee put it back on their schedule just to say, yeah, this is what we were talking about before, and we don't feel like these changes that are being suggested, because if you look, half of the policy has changed. It's huge changes to the policy. And we don't have to bring it back. If we look at it and we go, okay, we have no concerns about this, then the policy committee doesn't have to bring any more changes forward. But I just think it should be that large a quantity of changes should be reviewed at some level.
Right. Well, there is a recommendation on on changing up policies, right? That are really changes that are coming from the state. But it sounds like you're saying not to look at just those changes from the state, but look at the rest of the policy.
No, well, all of these 3 policies we have recently reviewed within the last year or 2.
Okay.
So, and it's all the same people on the policy committee.
Yeah.
And maybe I just feel some ownership of them because I know we spent a lot of time going through every part of them. And I saw the amount that has changed in all of those. And it wasn't just a few lines here or there. It was large paragraphs crossed out and lots of new information.
Line up with the state, right?
To line up with the state,
Yeah.
right?
So
Okay.
if I can make a
Any
comment,
comments?
yeah, I would just say that I think that we really do want to adopt, especially the ones that are in tonight, right? My recommendation is to adopt them because we really need to bring our policies on these specific items into alignment with the new state law. They've been vetted by MSBA. These are their recommended changes. Their recommended changes were integrated, with the changes that the policy committee had already brought forward. But just to Amy's point, is any member of the policy committee can ask us to bring a policy to that committee just to have a discussion about. So there's no problem with doing that. And then if the committee then says, oh, we need to make one more change or this, that can happen. The key thing on these policy updates is there's a substantial amount of changes in the policy because of the new legislation. And in some cases, as you've seen, there's some parts that were being sunset. There are some parts that are being implemented. I do worry with these, if we don't take, which I know we're going to move on them tonight, we risk getting behind on making sure our local policies are in alignment with the new legislation, which could leave us open for some issues. So I'm supportive of bringing, if any board member could ask us, hey, could policy committee take a look at that? That's not a problem. We can do that at any time. I appreciate not wanting to hold up the process tonight.
Yes, Tom.
Again, not to pull anything, but I did find one typo. And then in a couple of the policies, they talk about parents. And in our new thing, we have parents and more.
Great question. So that I really appreciate you bringing that forward. So here's the key thing. In the policy that you're referring to around special education students, we actually had made all the changes to parent, guardian, caregiver. Then we ran it past our special education administration who said, love it, like to be inclusive, can't do it. And the reason you can't do it is that the law is very specific when it comes to the IEP process about who has decision-making power. And we cannot, as a school, expand the number of people who have that very specific decision-making power for students in IEPs. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Tom, because and so in the style guide, in the updated style guide that we included in the table file tonight, Anita and I worked together on finding how do we make that understanding that when we are able to be inclusive, we're going to use that parent, guardian, caregiver, unless there is some legislative reason that we are not able to, that it would change I forget the term we use now, but it would change it would impact that particular group's legal rights, if that makes any sense. So that is a difficult part of trying to standardize, is that in our business, as you well know, there's a standard until there's not. And then typically that is dictated by some legislative body that we do not have the complete control over. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, Tom.
Right. And so there was a typo. Should I just email?
Please do. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
If you think about the number of words that are in these policies and how few typos there are, it's pretty amazing.
Okay, Corey.
Quick question about the process, because I share some of the same thought that Amy has about just making sure these are aligned with district style mostly. So with respect to the discussion about reviewing them, I'm not in favor of that, because usually when we do it, we defer to state statute anyway, because it's very legalese and we need to be protective. So we don't want to change the intent of that language. So I understand your concern, but I think in most cases, when we've reviewed policies such as this, we usually defer back anyway. But when we do approve these in the consent agenda, will it be followed up, then look through for our district style guide? So like I'm looking at bullet lists and they're not correct because they're state statute, but they don't align with our style. So how do we want to approach that for consistency across policies?
So once you approve the style guide, we will make those changes.
So that will be moving forward whenever we approve policies via consent agenda, they would be reviewed after.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we will make sure that we do everything that we can to put them into our style guide before you get them.
Great, thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Jeff, second. Second by Tom. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye. Aye. Opposed? motion carries. All right, we're on to items for individual action. Okay, we do have a resolution tonight, which Anita will facilitate. We have a request to take action on the district's health insurance. And we received a thorough presentation on this important issue at the last meeting, and you can read more summary details in the memorandum of this meeting's agenda. I'm going to take a motion and then we can discuss further. Is there a motion to direct administration to collaborate with NEA to create a memorandum of understanding to make the district's monthly health insurance contribution $583.26 for single coverage and $1,774.40 for family coverage? Moved by Julie, second by Corey. Okay, Dr. Hellman, do you have any comments?
Well, I want to say thank you to Val Mertersdorf and Molly Wieselman for their hard work to be able to analyze this, to work with our consultant, and to, after considering a variety of different options, to bring this proposal to you. Molly and Val are both here tonight, and they are able to answer any direct questions that people have. This is a difficult circumstance, right? And I appreciate the proposal that's coming forward to support our employees while also recognizing the ongoing stewardship challenge that this will provide for the district. Our strategic commitment of people to make sure that we have a reasonable and quality health plan is really prioritized here. So we will work through those other components. And this is there's a number of different ways that this was looked at. This is the best solution in this particular scenario. And I would like to invite Molly or Val if they have any further comments that they want to share with the board before you vote. If there's anything else you want the board to know, otherwise they are here for any questions or comments that you would like to direct to them.
Good. Okay, questions or comments? Julie?
So again, I want to echo what Dr. Hillman said, and, thank you to Val and Molly for putting this proposal together. I just wanted to clarify then in terms of the motion where we would work to do the $583.26 for single coverage and $1,770 or 40 cents for family coverage. That will represent an approximate 10.5% premium increase for our employees.
We are taking a 10.5% increase on our overall premium. That amount of increase will keep us at the 80-20 split we've always had in the cost sharing of the insurance.
Okay. And then I don't think we can underscore enough just how incredibly challenging this environment is, and just some of when they released inflation figures, healthcare was at a 28% inflationary increase. And a lot of that is being driven off corporate profits. And, it's just really disheartening. And it certainly doesn't help that our legislators had $9 billion in the last legislative session and did not choose to give schools any additional funding. And this will hit our general fund budget, which is, what we need to bring dollars to the classroom. And this is absolutely the right thing to do. I think Noel made the most salient point when he said behind every claim is a name. And so I'm so grateful that we're able to do this, but the challenges will remain. And I just thank you so much for the work you do and for your benefits advisory committee and coming forward with this proposal. And I will be, I'm very grateful that as a board, I plan to support this motion. And I know as a board, we have always been there one thing I appreciate about our board is how supportive we are of our staff, and we're able to do this. We're in an incredibly fortunate position to be able to do it. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie. Well said. Anyone else comment or question? No? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Thank you, Molly. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next, we have, we'll take action on policy 630, 646. Sunsetting, I believe, right?
Yep.
Sunsetting 648, 649, and 650. And we'll also take action on the style guide, which an updated version of it was presented in the table file. Is there a motion to approve the recommended updates to these policies, 630 and 646, and sunset 648, 649, and 650, as well as adopt the proposed style guide? Moved by Amy, second by Tom. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Hillman, do you want to make any comments or?
I think we presented these fairly significantly the last time. I do want to point out in that due process hearing 646, that's the one that Tom was referring to before about where it was using the word parent. I do want to point out that board members did also comment on a word that had been in the title in terms of parents and guardians of handicapped children. We did also talk about the antiquated nature of that word, and we did talk about that with Special Education Administration. They followed up and they determined it was acceptable for us to remove that. Again, anything with due process, we're always wanting to make sure we're following the law. There was no potential problematic piece to remove that word. So I just want, that was feedback board members gave the last time. That has been changed. But this also is the same policy, has that issue with the parent, guardian, caregiver.
Anyone else? Questions or comments? I wanted to ask about in the style guide again, down in that section that says months. It doesn't read right to me, so I just wanted to point that out, and maybe I'm not reading it all that. It's not coming across right for me. It says if the months are on their own, such as classes resume in September, winter break starts in January, and then there's a period. There's no follow-up on that.
And just give me 1 second to get back to my table file.
And then the final sentence is fine. If used by itself, it's always spelled out, but that second sentence is like, it needs a little.
So you're looking at
little-
section around,
Semicolon, the period.
okay. If the month is used by itself, it is always spelled out.
Right, but the first sentence, if the months are on their own, but then.
Oh, if the months
it
are on
is
their
a
own.
Period there, and there's no.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, if the months are on their own, okay. Yep. Abbreviate the, so it's really if the months are on their own, then you're using, well, that's where, but when used with a specific date, then months, September, okay, yes. We just inadvertently deleted that. So if the months are on their own, classes resume in September, winter breaks starts in January, the month name is spelled out in its entirety. So if people are comfortable with us making that minor technical revision, we'd appreciate that. Good, sorry, thank you for that.
Yeah.
We want the style guide to be right so that it's implemented
So-
correctly.
Right, okay, good, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Finally, we have a resolution of school board supporting Form A, application to Minnesota State High School League Foundation. I'll take a motion and then we can have discussion. Is there a motion to approve the resolution of school board supporting Form A, application to Minnesota State High School League Foundation? Moved by Amy, second by Jeff. Thank you. Are there any comments you want to make, Dr. Hammond?
I don't believe so, Val. Is there anything you'd want? This is really getting some additional help from the State High School League to offset student activities for students who need some additional financial assistance, is my understanding.
Good. Okay, board members, do you have any questions or comments? Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and then Anita, will you facilitate the roll call vote?
Broniak,
Aye.
Butler,
Aye.
Hurwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Cornell.
Aye.
Very good, thank you. Motion passes. All right, we're on to items for information. We have the World's Best Workforce Plan presentation. Hope Langston, Director of Instructional Services, will summarize the 2022-2023 World's Best Workforce Plan at the public hearing scheduled at 9:15.
5:15.
At 5:15, thank you. On Monday, November 14th. This public hearing will precede the regular school board meeting scheduled on Monday, November 14th at 6 p.m. Right, our future meetings, we have regular board meetings on Monday, November 14th, November 28th, and December 12th at 6 p.m. in the district boardroom. That is all the business that we have for tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Jeff, second. By Tom, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. We are adjourned.